everybody. Welcome back to the Drink Tank, brought to you by Valuetainment's The Unusual Suspects. I'm Connor Walcott, and joining me today in the beautiful Valuetainment Cigar Lounge and Bar is a cold glass of bourbon and the incomparable, the muscular, the handsome Chris Manno. Today we are talking about election fraud in Maricopa County, Arizona. Again, they can't get it together over there, it seems. Chris, give us a quick preview of what we're talking about.
Yeah, right? Tell me if you've heard this before. Something fishy's going on with election security in Maricopa County, right? So, last Friday, a temporary worker at the Maricopa County Tabulation and Election Center was arrested for theft. He's forced the county to now reprogram its security equipment that's going to cost taxpayers $20,000. And what he did was he made off with a security fob that allowed him access to the room containing vote tabulators and iPads that make the whole election system go.
Wow,
right?
just in time for the 2024 election. And sneak peek for all of you who are wondering, he's not a Trump supporter.
Well, shocking how that works. Well, here, that's what's so interesting, right? Because as happens every single time something like this is a thing, we never get the full story. So for the first 24 hours, he was a Trump supporter. And that's because no network would touch the story, and you were only getting little like droplets of what they wanted you to hear for the first 24, like we know, right? So Walter Ringfield Jr. is his name. He's a temp worker that was actually brought on board by, and this is gonna shock you, Our Voice, Our Vote. And I'll give you a guess who funds Our Voice, Our Vote. Would you like to take a guess?
I have a guess. Go ahead and tell
Please,
us if I'm right.
Tell the people.
Is it a certain globalist billionaire who happens to invest heavily in elections?
Somehow, some way is still kicking, but yes, and he's got his fingerprints all over this, all right? So Walter Ringfield.
Yeah, it's insane that this is all connected like this. Like, the thing that no media outlet has covered this.
No, and they won't. And it's been 2 weeks now. So the craziest thing was this. So Walter Ringfield. Now let me tell you a little bit about Walter Ringfield. He's on probation for a prior felony. He was arrested for allegedly. He was arrested for stealing last year, right? Walter Ringfield is a registered Democrat, and this is where it was so tricky right out of the gate, right? Because people are saying he's a Trump supporter. He went in and he was held for 5 days. He was incarcerated. When he went in, he had Facebook, a LinkedIn, an Instagram, a TikTok, and a Twitter profile, and a Truth Social, right? So what they were able to do was, in the 5 days that Walter Ringfield was incarcerated, the IG was scrubbed, the Facebook was scrubbed, the LinkedIn was scrubbed, the TikTok was scrubbed, the Twitter was scrubbed, but they left conveniently the Truth Social up. So they made sure to let everybody know this guy's a Trump supporter with a Truth Social account. And when we couldn't get any information about it, that seemed fishy. Now, who has the ability to scrub your profiles while you're incarcerated? Doesn't that seem funny?
Yeah, that would seem to be a law enforcement thing, because normally they reserve that for actual violent crimes, like school shooters and terrorists and stuff like that. That's when the social media companies coordinate with the government and they scrub the account. They try to cover up as much information about them as they can. More often than not, it's because the shooter used non-binary pronouns or identified as a cow or whatever. But a guy who stole something from an election center seems like it's very low stakes for them to start scrubbing social media pages.
Well, yeah, they scrubbed social media pages. And to have a guy incarcerated for 5 days for picking up a key fob, which this is rich too. He swears he was, so he's a temp worker now sent here from that Soros-funded organization. What he said as a defense is, I was trying to go from being a temp worker to a full-time worker, so I was trying to be proactive and just clean stuff up. So they have him on camera cleaning up that security fob and actually putting it in his pocket.
Because that's what I do with all the trash I try to clean up around
Well, I wouldn't
here.
worry about taking the garbage out or like cleaning the dust off or anything. I go right for the security fobs too. But here's the deal. So let's talk back about the social media stuff. The social media stuff, initially, what was it filled with, right? It was filled with pictures with Mark Kelly, Greg Stanton, Amy Klobuchar, among others. So immediately, you know, they had to get that down. Now, what else is interesting about this guy is he's a registered Democrat who, as recently as this year, and he's from Phoenix, was registered to try to get on the ballot to run for Senate as a Democrat. So, yeah, I mean...
How does a guy... Because I believe he was also on probation for another theft. How does that guy not only get a job working with ballots, which, felons can't vote.
Right.
It would seem like they also shouldn't work at voting centers. But then on top of that, also register to run for office.
Yeah.
What do we know anything about his run? What he filed for? What he was trying to accomplish?
He didn't get far enough. He was on like an interested person type of thing where you have to send paperwork in, and there's a list of it. I'll make sure that we kind of plug it into this thing where the viewers can see it. But I have a list of a whole bunch of names, and his name is conveniently one of the names on the list, and it's outrageous to think. And then to not be able to get information, it's just the same crap that we see over and over and over, where only what they wanted to come out came out. And still, now we're about 10 days after this, and where have you heard it on any major news outlet?
Yeah, the sources we were looking at just as we were learning about it, it's
Right.
not ABC, NBC.
Certainly isn't.
I don't even think Fox touched it.
Nope.
I think it was like, more off the beaten path kind of news. Definitely happened. Confirmed to have happened.
Right.
But all our national news outlets decided this wasn't worth our time to know about.
Yeah, well, look, if we have learned anything over the last 5 years, and this is something like, if you guys know me, I'm a sports guy. I became more sort of knowledgeable on politics when it became something that infiltrated every piece of my life, right? So if I've learned anything over the last couple of years, it's how effective the media has become now in deciding what we know and don't know. Because my whole group at home, who obviously, like, let's be real, they aren't like the people here who live and breathe this stuff, So my group doesn't know anything about this. So they're voting, they plan to vote, but they would have never come across a story like this. And that's a masterful, evil job by the media doing what they've been doing the last bunch of years.
Yeah. And like we said earlier, this is far from the first time Maricopa County has had problems.
Yeah.
Going all the way back to 2020. Mm-hmm. You remember we were just talking about this a little earlier. Before midnight on election night, Fox News called Arizona for Joe Biden.
Yeah, Brett Baer. Shout Brett Baer.
Yeah, with I don't remember what percentage of the vote was in, but it was not nearly enough to call an entire state.
It was hours before anybody else was ready to call it, and that's something that I think haunts Brett Baer and Fox till this day. People still crush him about it, and it's terrible because you win Arizona. I mean, that's a big piece of the election. You got to win Arizona to win the election, right?
Yeah, Fox called it, I believe, before Associated Press,
Yes.
which is normally like the default outlet to call things.
I think in certain spots, people were still able to vote while they called it. And I remember that one being the one where I was watching the TV and I felt broken afterwards because I was like, oh, no. And you got to imagine that there's people out there who might have been still waiting online because on the West Coast, they're hours behind us. And they're saying, oh, forget it. They just called it. What am I going to go out there and get these last minute votes in for, And it's just disheartening, frustrating.
And that's more a problem outside of Arizona as well because
for sure.
they do that everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's still 4.5 hours until the polls close.
Yeah.
But we've decided to go ahead and call the state. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what does that say to the potentially hundreds, thousands of people still in line in every state where it's like, well,
every vote counts.
Might as well go home.
Yeah.
Yeah, our sacred democracy must be preserved by civic participation, right?
And then we saw it as recently as Carrie Lake and Katie Hobbs, right? Because that's another one and that's something I think Carrie Lake's still fighting till this day. And stuff comes out.
You mean that horrible election denying Carrie Lake?
Yes, Carrie Lake, who I wouldn't hate if she became the VP for the future. But I don't know. We'll see. She manages the media beautifully.
Yeah, I mean the way she made fun of CNN Plus after that fell apart was amazing.
Right.
But the weird thing with Katie Hobbs was that during that election, wasn't she the Arizona election supervisor?
She absolutely was. And they didn't even make her leave her position. Because she said, like, I'm okay. It's not going to be a conflict. I'm okay.
Totally.
Yeah, trust me.
Totally. It's all above board.
Yeah,
this is not going to be done in a questionable way, said the person who benefited most from things being done questionably.
That's incredible.
But I remember, because I've been covering stuff in Maricopa County since the 2020 election. I was working for this little conservative publication based out of Boynton Beach at the time. We had a small podcast, very, very low production. It was just us trying to talk about the things going on. We had at that time exactly one podcast that was delisted from YouTube because they banned us or banned that video. Right. And it was us talking about the Maricopa County election audit, where they went through and scanned the ballots, and it was during the height of Trump's challenges to the elections in certain swing states. And what they found during that scan was, hey, some of these signatures are exact duplicates. Mm-hmm. Some of these bubbles look like they were copied and pasted. Like someone bubbled in Joe Biden, and the pen made a little bit of a line over the edge of the bubble, and we found that line duplicated across 8 ballots. The signatures were questionable. They presented all this in a PowerPoint presentation showing picture after picture after picture, and we covered that video, and they delisted it. So because this was the height of election misinformation censorship.
Right.
So this goes back a long time. I don't really know much of what goes on in Maricopa County outside of that, but that seems like things are not being run very well there.
And it's pretty much a known fact. If you win Maricopa County, you win Arizona. Maricopa County is so big, you can't lose Maricopa County and win Arizona theoretically, right? I think that's what's become the most frustrating part of the whole thing to me is I am open to anything. Like if you can convince me that I'm wrong, I'm always open to hearing it. I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me, you know? But with this stuff, this election stuff over the last couple of years, what frustrates the crap out of me is being able to see stuff with my own eyes and people telling me, no, you didn't see that. No, you're wrong. Like, that didn't happen. And they call you an election denier, but they don't explain why boxes of ballots are being pulled out late or everything's being shut down at 2 a.m. And we talked about that big, curve. And it's just, that's the most infuriating part to me. And yeah, Maricopa County has just been a constant culprit of this.
No, man, the pipes burst and we sent everybody home and we put
That's
poster boards over the windows.
Yeah, of course.
There's no explanation for
Business
this.
as usual.
Yeah. But back to what this guy stole. You said he swiped a key fob that gave him access to a very important
So there's
room
3 of these. There's 3 of these security key fobs, and they found out later in the day that one of them had been missing. What I will give them credit for in Maricopa County is they had the key fob back within a day, and they had the guy arrested. Now, I don't know what kind of damage he could have done. They say that they took the necessary precautions, and that's where the $20K went, to kind of scrub and reprogram and reset everything. But inside that room, yes, apparently are the vote tabulators and then the iPads that they use for sort of registering and making sure that all of that is done status quo. So, I mean, you get into there, that's the brains of the operation. So if you could start, and the crazy thing too is, when I initially saw this story, now I've been keeping up on this story for the last couple of days, and a couple of days later, it showed there's a funny post that came out from Walter Ringfield, where it's people talking about how Trump is in the lead on this, and it's going to be real tough. And he comments, "Don't worry about it, I got this." And now they've screenshotted and clipped that. So coincidentally, the guy who's got this and is going to make sure that this doesn't happen is the same guy who's cleaning the office to be proactive. So he's no longer a temp, and he swiped a security fob. So oddly enough,
this speaks to something that people have discussed about the 2020 election as well.
Right.
People who want to argue, it was stolen. It was Democrat manipulation took the election from Trump. Fair case to make.
Okay.
Fair bit of evidence to speak to that. But what they're looking for is this grand, sweeping conspiracy of, the Biden people sat down with Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and George Soros in a shady back room in a DC nightclub.
Looking for a movie scene.
They called everybody together and said, okay, here's the plan. You're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and that's how we're going to win. But if that existed, you'd be able to find some kind of evidence of it.
Right.
But what this incident shows, and I think you'd find a lot more of, is individually motivated people.
Sure.
This guy, at least it doesn't seem like he's some operative of a giant conspiracy. Obviously, you said there's a little bit of funding linking back to Soros, but it's not like this dude was meeting with Soros one-on-one.
No, never.
So this guy is a Democrat who hates Trump. And motivated by nothing other than that, and the media narrative that Trump is going to destroy the country if he wins again, this guy says, don't worry, I got it.
Yeah.
I will make sure, within my limited capacity, coordinating with nobody, that whatever I can do to influence things will not happen. And imagine if that played out at a national scale.
Sure.
Where you had hundreds or potentially even thousands of people, individual poll workers and people at vote counting stations who weren't coordinated with anybody. They just said, yeah, I can put my thumb on the scale to shift 10, 20 ballots to Biden's favor.
Well, there's 2 types of people that can really latch on to something and really go, and it's the elites who have all the control and have all the power to lose, and they're ones who you know are down for the cause, and they sure are. Because say what you want about the Democrats and the conservatives, the Democrats ride for the Democrats, man. They'll all find a lie, they'll find a talking point, and it's very rare that one of them strays. You know what I mean? So everybody's locked in together. And then who else can you get to buy into something like this and go gung-ho for the cause? And it's an impressionable, maybe a lower ranking type felon guy who you can make believe that there's a future here for you if you do what we say. So that seems to be the type of people that they're getting. They're not getting strong-willed, strong-minded, successful individuals who kind of fall between the two. You get the extremes on both sides. You get the people who have everything to lose from a power and money standpoint, and you get the people who have everything to gain from a status, from a, maybe a financial type standpoint. And that's what you find in all these things.
And of course, if we had an honest and fair media that was doing its job, we would have people asking the question, okay, let's investigate who this guy was connected to.
Right.
Because maybe he was just trying to swipe this key fob for his own purposes. Maybe somebody put him up to it. We don't really know. We need to be digging into that. But of course, the media is not going to do that because, as we said at the top, nobody's even talking about it. Nobody wants you to know about this because it raises the possibility of questioning, how often does this happen?
Right.
Because sure, maybe this guy's one incident isolated doesn't mean anything. Or maybe this happens all the time.
Right.
How many key fobs go missing that we know nothing about?
And it's probably part of it is because now Maricopa County itself is under a microscope. So there are definitely good independent journalists out there trying to do this job, and God bless them because they are probably the reason that we found this. But yeah, some random county in the Midwest or down south somewhere that nobody is really putting their thumb on, absolutely happens all the time. It does.
Yeah. So this guy who stole the key fob, he has felony convictions.
Yes, he does.
He's a liar. He's willing to skew things in favor of his preferred political party. Seems like he'd actually be right at home in the United States Senate. So maybe we should have let that guy get a little bit further.
Yeah.
He'd be in good company amongst his fellow Democrats. So what's some of the follow-up stuff that's happening because of this? Is there any new developments here? Like what's
there really hasn't been, and it's very tough to get information on. If what the head of police is saying out there, he's saying that they cleaned the job up quick, that it was just this one-time thing. It has been corrected. We found it immediately. He gave credit to his people who didn't, and he came right out. And like I said, I was happy with the answer that I got, and I don't know. We'll see what happens with it, but no, that's as recent as I could find out. It was a 24-hour thing. Ringfield was incarcerated for about a week. That too is kind of fishy for just swiping a key, right? If he accidentally swiped a key, to keep him inside for 5 days or 6 days is a bit more suspect. But yeah, it's been really hard to find information on. I was listening to Steve Bannon talk about it, and he was saying, no, we can't get very much more than this. He had Caroline Wren on. She broke down some of this stuff, but still no real resolution or, the drill. But this is what always happens. They'll let it die in the media and just hope everybody forgets about it,
Yeah, of course.
We won't get a tight answer. He's not going to get convicted on anything.
And if somebody who's as dialed in as Ben and can't get a clear-cut answer, then that means there either is nothing or a deliberate effort to make it look like there's nothing.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to definitely keep an eye on that one, and that's, again, where a fair and unbiased media would make sure it doesn't die down.
And look out for other ones like it. You know what I mean? That's why I think it's so vital that people volunteer at their election centers this year. We can't let that same stuff happen that happened, the previous couple of years. We have to be the difference,
Yeah, and then the worst part is that it shows the election voting system is very vulnerable.
Yes.
Where this could have potentially been catastrophic. They have to spend all this money to wipe passwords, reset machines, investigate for tampering, do their due diligence, which at least it seems like they're trying to do. But this was all brought to its knees by one dude walking out a door with a key fob.
Right.
Imagine what would have happened if it had been 2-3 weeks before they noticed it was gone. Because you said there were multiple copies of it.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody just, I'm assuming somebody else has the copy, and they don't bother to check for a couple weeks until whoever got access to it can do whatever they want. And then who's to say how catastrophic that is?
And I think that's what's so disheartening to like regular people who are, like, I'm telling you, as I was growing up older, like the last probably last election, the election before, and the election before, I was super, super pumped to vote, man. I was very proud to vote, very excited to go vote. And part of why they do what they do is to kind of dull that excitement and make people, look, they can make you feel like my vote doesn't count. And you'll get hundreds of thousands of people who say, nah, my vote doesn't count. So when you really believe, I mean, I got family members like this who really believe they're going to go to the polls and I'm going to put the vote in, but it doesn't matter. And when you start to make people believe that their vote and these elections aren't fair and they don't matter, that's part of the job they're trying to do. When they believe that their candidate is significantly weaker than the candidate they're running against, they know that they need 1 million people to say, you know what, my vote doesn't count anyway. They're just going to rig it. So that's part of what they've been so successful at, which sucks.
Yeah. Well, after that Thursday night debate performance, if they're going to rig it for Biden again, they're really going to have to pull out all the stops. So maybe they'll need a few thousand more ring fields to steal some key fobs.
Yeah, ring fields everywhere. He's going to need ring fields everywhere.
And that's entirely possible that we might see that. So that's why we do this. That's why we appreciate the independent journalists who bring this kind of thing to our attention. But on that note, I think that's all that there is to be said about that story for now. We will be monitoring it closely. We'll be back with updates if any more breaks on that. So I think that will do it for us today.
Awesome.
Thank you folks so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you tune in with us. Always nice to be here having some drinks, cold drinks, hot takes, as we like to say around here. I think things are going pretty well on that front. If you are new to the channel, then be sure to subscribe. You'll never miss a drink tank. Make sure you always get the notifications for the unusual suspects when we have our full panel. Chris and I are in there. And of course, the incomparable Vincent Oshana, who is why most of you show up, I'm pretty sure. But sometimes the rest of us do cool stuff too. And on that note, I think that'll do it for us today. So
Thank you,
Chris, thanks for being here.
Thank you all.
Cheers, guys.